What's going on, YouTube? Welcome back to another Carolina Country Boy Classic. Today we're going to be going over a technique that I think a lot of people look over. Stay tuned for the rest of the video. Just want to kind of make some announcements, just kind of let you guys know what's been going on. So I started YouTube about a couple months ago, and I never really got on a schedule. I never really continued with it. So I'm making an effort now to try to make more videos and try to put out more content for you guys, because I do see the benefits of doing this for not just me, but for other people. And I think it'll just be a great thing to do all around. I love YouTube. I love the idea of YouTube. So I will be continuing this as we go on throughout the year. But anyways, guys, stay tuned for the rest of the video, and I hope you like it. So the technique we're going to be talking about today is called the drop shot. I know a lot of you know what the drop shot is. You tie a weight on the bottom of the line, you tie a polymer knot to a little circle hook. That's basically a drop shot. There's many ways to do it. I'm not going to get into that in this video, but what I am going to get into is how can we leverage this technique to catch the biggest smallmouth that live in our rivers in the summertime. There's a lot that goes into it. You really have to think about what summertime smallmouth are doing, when they feed, how they feed, and what they're looking for. Okay, and a lot of people make the mistake of thinking that drop shots are just for clear lakes up north, or even in some of the lakes in the south, they said drop shots good, and it can be. But a lot of people look over rivers, they think, I'm not going to be throwing that in a river. That doesn't make any sense. Let me just clarify this. I've caught some big smallmouth in the summer on a drop shot, and you can too. Let's take a look at the gear that I use to actually do this and do it effectively. So starting off with the rod, I have an Arc Series West Logan, a 7-foot extra fast, medium light. It's rated for a 4 to 10 pound line. Me personally, I use 10-pound braid, high vis braid to a 12-pound leader. I know 12-pound leader to a lot of you may seem overkill. It's not overkill for me because I understand how these smallmouth act. They'll wrap you around rocks, they'll dig, and they'll get you some sticks or something. They're not like, lake fish where you can pull them out of cover. A lot of times, especially I know this because I fish for catfish on the river, I'll break off on 40, 50 pound line because that's exactly what those catfish do. They'll wrap you around that stuff and break you off. So the same thing kind of applies to smallmouth, whether I'm fishing with live bait or with any kind of bait at all. I mean, I'm going to be fishing with 12 pound line on a spinning rod. I don't like to go any higher because it doesn't come off the spool very well, but that's why we use the braid, the 10-pound braid backing. It helps that line get off of the spool easy and just helps it, it's just a very streamlined combo. And the reel that I'm using is a 3000 series Arc. I really like Arc products. They're very budget friendly, and they're very quality products. This is actually more of a high-end rod and reel, but they do make a lot of good, reels for y'all that you can pick up. I'll leave the link in the description to this exact combo. But basically what the drop shot is I've already mentioned it, but basically you've got a hook, okay? And that hook is a drop shot hook, and you've got it tied like with a polymer knot or some other knot that I used. And on the bottom of the line, you have a drop shot weight, okay? I hope that's focusing. But that drop shot weight is what keeps the lure on the bottom, okay? And basic drop shot technique, how you work the drop shot is you throw it out, okay, and then it's going to be on the bottom. You're gonna take all the slack out of your line, and you're basically just gonna, a lot of people say to shake it. Personally, I don't think in a river you need to, because you have current and you could shake the bait out of the fish's mouth if you're not careful. So it's very important that you are aware of that. But the way that we target these smallmouth and where we target these smallmouth is they're going to be in deep water, okay? Relative to the river that you fish in and the broad where I fish, 10 feet of water might be deep. But in your river, it might be 20 or 30. Like up there in St. Lawrence, you have a lot of rivers that are a lot deeper than that. But relativity is the name of the game here. We're really just trying to find deeper than average water. There's a lot of water out there that is shallow, and people think they're in deep water, but they're not, okay? You need to study the map of your river and really come to a conclusion of where this deeper water is. Once you find that deeper water, you've got to find shoals and oxygen. Okay, that's where your big smallmouth are going to hang out in the summertime, and even pushing into the fall, they're going to hang out there. And this is why I like to use the drop shot, because a lot of people, what they do is they'll throw a Texas rig, they'll throw a jig, they'll throw a Ned rig, whatever it is. A Ned rig's probably the best to cover water in a very horizontal fashion, because it's a small bait and it gets a lot of bites in the summer. It can get big bites, and I'll make a video about the Ned rig probably in the next couple weeks. But for the technique that I think is slept on in the river, and I think that a lot of people don't use, and that I've actually started using the last year or two, is the drop shot. Because I mean, I just 2 days ago, I was out on the Broad and I was able to catch 30 plus smallmouth. I had one that was 3.5, 18 inches long, you know, and I have a picture of it. I'll show it on the video for you right there. And what it basically allowed me to do was to really just break down every section of that current. You know, the deep water channel swing right behind the eddy, okay, right above the shoals too. You can hit it right above the shoals. But see, what other techniques don't do well with this technique is the heavier weight you use, the more it's going to stay in that one spot. Okay, I like to use a weight that'll kind of drift along, but if you really find a school of smallmouth, you can absolutely tear them apart with a drop shot. And I mean absolutely tear them apart. Because what I'll throw is what we call a Berkeley flatworm, and this is used all over the United States, but they're really, really good for smallmouth and some of the Great Lakes and stuff. And I'll actually have a close-up. I'll just show you right now what this looks like, and I'll show you how I rig it in just a second. But I mean, these baits are absolutely incredible at just mimicking a little bait fish in the current. And guys, I made a video about the ultra vibe. You can throw an ultra vibe on this too. I'm not saying you can't do that. The drop shot's very versatile, but I like to throw minnow style baits, because what's going to happen with these minnow style baits and the river current is it's going to get down to that level where, see, that's like maybe a foot and a half leader. Okay, I like to have a little higher so that, you know, if there's any elevation change on the drop shot, it's still going to keep it above the fish's mouth. And the key is not to be too far above the fish and not be under the fish. You want the smallmouth to be basically looking at it in their face. You want to be bothering them is what you're trying to do, because a lot of the fish that you fish for in the current, they're not exactly active, okay? And you're trying to make them active or trigger a reaction strike. And a lot of times when they see just a wide open smallmouth, or if the bait sees a wide open smallmouth that's just sitting there, has been inactive all day, and then something changes, barometric pressure, or they see a school of bait go over, they get active, they get fired up, and they see your drop shot, they're going to hit that drop shot 9 times out of 10. Especially if you keep it there in that exact same spot for sometimes up to a minute, 2 minutes. I'll just stick it there, and what'll happen is that drop shot, well, you don't have to work it, guys. Like I mentioned, the drop shot will move through the current like this, and I like to give it occasional hops, because the drop shot weight actually makes noise on the bottom. So that's another good thing I want to point out. But that's basically it for covering the gear, basically covering what, you know, where you're going to throw this thing. And it really does trigger bigger bites, because a lot of you are fishing around bigger smallmouth, but you're fishing things like Texas rigs, which they can work. You're fishing things like jigs, you're fishing things like topwaters, and topwaters can be great, but they don't work all day long. You know, if you really want to go out there and put something together, a drop shot 9 times out of 10 is going to work for you, especially in clearer water. I will say, when the water's really muddy, it's harder to get bites on the drop shot, because any kind of finesse approach when the water's muddy, in my opinion, is not a good approach, because you're trying to get a fish to see your bait, and the water's so dirty they can't see it. Okay, so when the water's, you know, clear to medium clear, that's when I like to pick up a drop shot in the summer. Now this summer it's been rainy, it's been very difficult to get bites on the drop shot, but the biggest thing is make sure that you throw that on there and try it. It's going to make a big difference in what you're doing on the river. We're going to switch locations to the car because I'm getting eaten alive by mosquitoes. So continuing the video, I'm going to talk about how we can rig this, the Berkeley power bait drop shot, or Berkeley flatworm. So basically you're going to take your bait, and I'll show you what it looks like here. It's got a really bad smell, but that's why these max scent power baits work, because they have a smell to them. But that's what they look like. Okay, it's got a bulbous tail on the back, if you can see what I'm saying, and that's going to allow the current to really move that drop shot. Okay, there's a lot of drop shot baits out there, a lot of them work. We're just talking about the technique. I'm not saying you have to use this one thing, but when I hook a drop shot, if I'm fishing around a lot of cover, I'm talking like wood, maybe there's a lay down in the river and there's an eddy behind it, what I'm going to do with this drop shot is I'm going to come in at an angle. I need to get closer. And then probably like at a 45. I'm going to come out at a 45, and I'm just going to keep it as straight as possible. All right, to where the point is barely sticking out. Okay, the point is barely sticking out, and what that's going to do is it's going to get hung up a lot less. Okay, if I'm fishing in open water, where there's, you know, occasional rocks, it's got a lot of sand and stuff, what I'll do is I'll come about a half an inch in to the bait, and I'll just go straight up, and then I'll come straight back out. 95% of the time, that's how I'm rigging the drop shot, because it's gonna hook up immediately when that fish picks it up. Okay, and that's very important, because if you hook it somewhere on the back, now you can also wacky rig this too. Like you could hook it back here where it's like that. You can do it that way. You know, experiment with this kind of stuff, guys. You know, I don't know everything about everything, but I can tell you enough with a drop shot. You do a lot of stuff with it. Okay, so just some key pointers on the drop shot. You know, there's a time and a place for it. Like I was saying, muddy water is not good for a drop shot or any kind of finesse tactic. But what the drop shot excels in is catching the lethargic, pressured, and spooky fish that you're not going to catch fishing a Texas rig and pulling it back, or a top water and pulling it back, or a crankbait and pulling it back. Any kind of bait that you would fish very quickly to try to cover water, it gets those fish that aren't going to react to that stuff. Okay, so that's where the drop shot excels. Find you a pool or a current with deep water and practice with it, and you'll see what I'm saying right now. There's a lot of guys out there that, you know, they live next to bigger rivers, and they know what I'm talking about. I mean, you can literally find a whole school of them, and you can get each and every one of them from the school. So wrapping things up, guys, try the drop shot. Okay, they're killer for big smallies in the river, or any kind of species in the river. It could be shoal bass, spotted bass, largemouth, even if you're fishing in some of the brush. Try the drop shot, use the drop shot. Let me know how you do with it. I do exceptional with it. It's one of the baits that I wanted to kind of talk about this summer, because a lot of people don't talk about it in rivers. Every time I watch somebody on YouTube, they're throwing some kind of horizontal lure, which is great. You do get bites like that, but when you find a lot of fish in one area, there's other big ones. Okay, and you have to learn to be able to slow down and pick that area apart. Just to kind of bring everything back together. You're looking for slack water, you're looking for current and oxygenated water, you're looking for deeper than average water, relativity, like I said, and you're looking for shade lines also. You're looking for rocks. Rocks primarily are good for drop shots, and you're looking for all the things to go together. The more things you can put together, the better off you're going to be at a spot. So that's why it's very important where you choose where you fish with a drop shot, because if you just fish somewhere where it looks good and you haven't looked at the rest of the river, then you might not do as well there. But if you take a look at the rest of the river, study the maps, the Google Earth, find where the biggest shoals are, find where the deepest water is, find the section of river that's the widest, and all that kind of stuff, you're going to have a lot more success doing that. Okay, so that's going to be it for this video. I hope you guys got something from this. I hope you can go try it out. It's a great technique. It's fun. You're using a spinning rod and you're catching big fish. We all love to hear that drag scream, especially me. In South Carolina with smallmouth, they're not really here much. You catch them occasionally in different rivers and lakes and stuff here, but it's not mainly a main target. Okay, so it's a very slept on species here, but I know in other places smallmouth is really fun. So I hope this helped you out. I hope you got something from this video. If you liked the video, like it, subscribe. I really look forward to making more videos in the future for y'all. But anyways, keep it country, keep it Carolina. I'll see you in the next one.